He was Marcus Thorne, the billionaire philanthropist whose face graced the cover of Forbes as the man who cured greed. She was Eleanor Vance Thorne, his brilliant and beautiful wife, the iron will behind his idealism. Tonight they were set to receive the Beacon of Hope Award broadcast live to millions. He thought he had it all: the reputation, the adoration, the perfect life. What he didn't know was that his perfect wife was about to become the architect of his destruction, and she'd chosen the largest possible stage to light the match. The penthouse wasn't a home. It was a statement. A 10,000-square-foot marvel of glass and polished marble overlooking Central Park. It was the physical manifestation of Marcus Thorne's success. Marcus himself was cut from the same cloth, impeccable suits from tailors on Savile Row, a smile worth $1 million, and a charisma that could disarm world leaders. He was the founder of Astra Innovative, a tech firm that had revolutionized data privacy, and he'd funneled his billions into the philanthropic powerhouse he ran with his wife, the Thorne Foundation for Tomorrow. Eleanor Vance Thorne was the other half of the equation. Where Marcus was the sun, Eleanor was the gravity that held the planets in orbit. A graduate of Yale Law with a background in forensic accounting at Vance and Sterling, she had given up her own skyrocketing career to become the COO of their foundation. She was the one who vetted the projects, balanced the ledgers, and ensured the millions they pledged to inner-city schools and cancer research actually got there. To the world, they were indestructible. The power pair, the New York Times had called them. This week their power was reaching its zenith. They were preparing for the Beacon of Hope Gala, a lavish event held annually at the Cipriani Ballroom on 42nd Street. It was the Oscars of philanthropy, and this year the spotlight was on them. They were the keynote speakers and the night's main honorees. "It's our moment, Elle," Marcus said, straightening his tie in the reflection of their apartment's floor-to-ceiling windows. He was practicing his speech. "This isn't just an award, it's leverage. This is how we get the federal grant for the Next-Gen Education Project." Eleanor smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She was sitting at their custom-built walnut desk, a laptop glowing in the dimming light. "It's wonderful, Marcus, truly." "You don't sound wonderful," he said, turning. His charm was his first line of defense. "Gala jitters. You've organized dinners for 3 different presidents. I think you can handle this." "It's not the gala," she said, tapping a key. "It's the Q4 report. I'm trying to reconcile the general fund before we close the books for the gala. There's a discrepancy." Marcus's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. "A discrepancy, Maria, in accounting can handle that. You're the COO, Eleanor, not the bookkeeper. Delegate." "I tried. It's a new vendor payment I don't recognize. A consulting firm, Apex Solutions. They've received 3 payments this quarter, totaling $1.2 million. Apex. Oh, right. That's the new lobbying group we're using in D.C. for the Next Gen project. They're good, very discreet." Eleanor frowned. "Lobbying, Marcus, we're a 501c3. We have strict limits on lobbying, and $1.2 million is astronomical. It wasn't in the budget I approved." Marcus walked over, placing his hands on her shoulders, rubbing them gently. The scent of his expensive cologne, something with notes of sandalwood and bergamot, enveloped her. It was a scent she used to associate with safety. "Darling, you handle the how. I handle the who. This is politics. It's messy. These Apex people are opening doors that were bolted shut. It's a necessary evil to achieve a greater good. Trust me." He kissed the top of her head. "Now close the laptop. We have that pre-gala dinner with the mayor at the Polo Bar. You can't show up with spreadsheet eyes." Eleanor felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. Marcus was smooth, but she was smart. She knew his tells. The way he used darling as a verbal punctuation mark, the way he answered a direct question with a philosophical statement. "You're right," she said, closing the laptop. "Just send me the file on Apex Solutions when you get a chance. I need it for the auditor's final report." "Of course, Elle. I'll have my assistant James send it over tomorrow. he said, already turning away his mind back on his speech. But James never sent the file, and when Eleanor tried to search for Apex Solutions on their shared server, she found a single locked folder. Access was denied. It was the first door in her own house that had ever been locked to her, and Eleanor Vance Thorne was the kind of woman who didn't just knock on locked doors. She found the blueprints, built a key, and discovered why it was locked in the first place. The next 3 days were a masterclass in deception. Outwardly, Eleanor was the perfect partner. She attended the fittings for her gala gown, a stunning deep sapphire custom-made by Oscar de la Renta. She reviewed the seating charts, approved the catering, and sat smiling beside Marcus during a brief fawning interview with Forbes Live about their secret to a successful partnership. "Transparency," Marcus had said, squeezing her hand. "We are a team in life and in work. There are no secrets." Eleanor had smiled, the heat of the studio lights feeling like an inferno. "Marcus is right. Trust is the foundation of everything we do." Inwardly, she was at war. Her background as a forensic accountant wasn't just a line on her resume. It was how her mind worked. She saw the world as a series of ledgers, and the numbers always had to balance. This one didn't. She started her investigation in the one place she knew Marcus would never look the past. She contacted an old colleague from her days at Vance and Sterling, a man named Philip Fisher. Fisher wasn't a partner. He was the man the partners called when things went very, very wrong. He was a private investigator, but he worked with data, not trench coats. "Fisher," she said, using a burner phone she'd purchased for cash from a bodega. "It's Eleanor Vance." There was a pause. "Well, that's a name I haven't heard. I thought you were saving the world, Ms. Vance." "Just Vance. And I need your professional discretion. I need you to find a ghost." She gave him the name Apex Solutions. While Fisher dug into the digital trenches, Eleanor worked from the inside. She used her C-level access to pull the server's IT logs. Marcus was right. The folder was locked. But he had made a mistake. He had locked her out, but he hadn't locked out David Chen, the Foundation's chief financial officer. David was a friend. He was a good, earnest man who believed in the Thorne Foundation's mission. He was also meticulous. Eleanor cornered him by the espresso machine. "David, a quick question. I'm prepping for the audit. Apex Solutions. Are they on your radar?" David's face clouded with a rare frustration. "Ugh, yes. Mr. Thorne's pet project. He onboarded them himself, bypassed all procurement protocols, said it was time-sensitive and related to the DC expansion." "Did you see an invoice?" "That's the thing, I didn't." He requisitioned the wire transfers directly from the discretionary fund, citing the CEO's prerogative clause in the bylaws. "The only thing I have is a routing number and a P.O. box in Delaware. It's irregular. Frankly, Eleanor, I was going to come to you about it after the gala. It makes me uncomfortable." "It makes me uncomfortable too," Eleanor said, keeping her voice level. "Can you get me the articles of incorporation, the ones we're required to have on file for any vendor over 10K? He said they were being processed. "Eleanor, what's going on?" "I'm just cleaning up the books, David. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Let me worry about Mr. Thorne's prerogatives." She left him the cold knot in her stomach, now a block of ice. Marcus hadn't just used his charm. He had used the bylaws she herself had helped write to bypass their entire system of checks and balances. That evening, as Marcus was at a final fitting for his gala tuxedo, Eleanor's burner phone vibrated. It was a message from Fisher. No digital footprint, no website, no employees on LinkedIn. This isn't a company, it's a shell. P.O. Box is a registered agent in Wilmington. A dead end. But the wire transfers aren't going to Delaware. They're being routed to a private wealth account at First Fidelity Bank. Bank account is registered to Apex Solutions LLC. Sole signatory. Eleanor held her breath. Isabella Reyes. Eleanor's blood ran cold. She didn't know that name. Fisher's next text came a minute later. "This is where it gets weird, Ms. Vance. Isabella Reyes, DOB 4/16/1990, has no connection to DC lobbying. She's not a politician. She's not a lawyer. She's a real estate broker. Or was. She let her license lapse 2 years ago. She has one asset to her name purchased 18 months ago. A property. 547 Willow Lane, Greenwich, Connecticut. Greenwich, not D.C. A $3 million house in one of the most exclusive suburbs in America. Eleanor looked at the clock. 7:00 p.m. Marcus would be at his fitting then dinner. He wouldn't be home until 11. She walked to the private elevator of their penthouse. "Javier," she said to their driver, "I need to go out, and I'll be driving myself." The drive from Manhattan to Greenwich, Connecticut took just over an hour. Eleanor drove her own car, a Tesla Model S that Marcus had gifted her, a car she now realized was probably a monument to his guilt. She drove with a chilling preternatural calm. The woman who left that penthouse was not the same one who would return. 547. Willow Lane was not a house. It was a fortress. It was a brand new, smart colonial set back from the road behind a copse of old-growth oak trees and a formidable stone gate. It was the kind of tasteful, obscene wealth that screams old money, even when it's brand new. Eleanor parked her car down the street under the cover of a weeping willow and walked. The night was cool. She pulled the collar of her Burberry coat tighter. There were lights on. The gate was slightly ajar, as if someone had just entered or was expecting a visitor. She slipped through the gap, her heart hammering against her ribs, and crept along the manicured lawn. The house was all glass at the back. Through the kitchen window she saw her, Isabella Reyes. She was exactly what Eleanor was not. Eleanor was classic, cool, and angular. This woman was all soft curves with a cascade of dark flowing hair. She was younger. She was wearing a simple white linen dress and was laughing, looking at someone just out of Eleanor's line of sight. And then he stepped into view. Marcus. He wasn't at a fitting. He wasn't at a dinner. He was here. He was wearing a soft gray cashmere sweater she had bought him for Christmas. He looked relaxed. He looked happy. He walked over to Isabella and kissed her. Not a peck, but a deep, lingering kiss that spoke of long-term intimacy. Eleanor pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob that threatened to tear her apart. This wasn't a cheap affair. This wasn't a one-night mistake. This was a life. And then the final devastating blow. A little boy no older than 2 came toddling into the kitchen, his arms outstretched. He was wearing blue footy pajamas. "Dada," he squealed. Marcus's face lit up with a brilliance Eleanor had never ever seen. Not when they signed the foundation papers, not when they won their first major grant, not even on their wedding day. He scooped the child into his arms and tossed him in the air. "There's my champion," Marcus boomed, kissing the boy's head. "How's my Leo? Isabella, a life, a family." Eleanor stumbled back, tripping over a sprinkler head. She fell to her knees in the damp grass, the shock so profound it was physical. How? When had he found the time between the board meetings in Shanghai, the charity summits in Geneva, the lobbying in D.C.? His entire life, their entire life, was a meticulously constructed lie. The man she thought she knew was a phantom. She forced herself to stand. Her analytical mind, the forensic accountant, took over where the wife had shattered. This was no longer a personal betrayal. It was a crime. Apex Solutions, $1.2 million. It wasn't for lobbying, it was for this. The house, the car in the driveway, a new Range Rover, the private school tuition, the life. He wasn't just cheating on her, he was stealing. He was stealing from their foundation. He was taking money meant for children who needed scholarships, for women who needed shelters, for research that could save lives. And he was funding his secret family. The man who was about to accept the Beacon of Hope award was a fraud, a thief, and the cruelest kind of hypocrite. She turned to leave, but as she did, her eyes caught something on the patio table. It was a stack of mail. The top letter was a bill from a high-end landscape architect. It was addressed to Marcus and Isabella Thorne. Thorne. He hadn't just given them his money. He had given them his name, her name. The cold calm she'd felt on the drive up was gone, replaced by a glacial purifying rage. He hadn't just built a second life. He had built it on the wreckage of their first, using the money they had pledged to the world. She got back in her car, her hands steady on the wheel. She wasn't just a wife. She was a witness. And Marcus had just made the single biggest mistake of his life. He hadn't just betrayed her. He had underestimated her. Eleanor drove back to Manhattan with the precision of a surgeon. The tears had frozen in her ducts. The rage had settled into a hard, dense object in her chest. She was no longer a victim. She was an instrument of justice. When she walked into the penthouse, it was 11:30 p.m. Marcus was home just as he'd said he would be. He was in the study pouring himself a whiskey. He was still in his suit, the one he'd supposedly worn to his fitting and dinner. He had changed, showered, and driven back from Greenwich to play the part of the devoted husband. "There you are," he said, smiling. "I was getting worried. You missed the dinner with the mayor. I had to tell him you had a sudden migraine." The lie was so effortless. "I'm fine," Eleanor said, her voice a monotone. "Just needed some air." "Well, you look pale. Get some rest, Elle. We have the big day tomorrow. Our big day." He raised his glass in a toast. "To us. The team." "To the team," she replied, her voice hollow. She walked past him into their master bedroom and locked the door. She didn't sleep. She sat on the chaise lounge by the window, watching the lights of the city that Marcus believed he owned. The next 48 hours, the final stretch before the gala, were an exercise in brutal, meticulous discovery. She had the what, the house, the who, Isabella and Leo, and the how, Apex Solutions. Now she needed the how much. She called David Chen, the CFO, at 6 a.m. "David, I'm invoking my authority as COO. I need a full, unfiltered data dump of the discretionary fund's outgoing wires for the last 24 months. I also need admin-level access to the backup server, the one in the vault." David, sensing the steel in her voice, didn't argue. "Eleanor, what's—" "Just do it, David, and not a word to Marcus. This is an internal audit, level 1. For the next 2 days, Eleanor lived a double life that would have made Marcus proud. By day, she was the gracious honoree doing a final walkthrough of the Cipriani, tasting the champagne and approving the press credentials. By night, she was deep in the digital labyrinth of her husband's crimes. And what she found was worse than she could have ever imagined. The $1.2 million was just the start. It was a single thread. She pulled it, and his entire tapestry of lies unraveled. It wasn't just Apex Solutions. It was Summit Holdings, Viridian Consulting, Oceanside Investments, all shells, all registered in Delaware or the Cayman Islands, all funneling money to private accounts, the Greenwich House, a condo in Miami, a portfolio of stocks, a trust fund for Leo Reyes Thorne. She traced the money back. He wasn't just skimming the discretionary fund. He was diverting entire grants. A $5 million grant from the Gates Foundation for STEM education, $1 million had been siphoned off. A $10 million pledge for a new wing at St. Jude Children's Hospital, $2.5 million, had disappeared into a logistics and implementation shell company. He had stolen. He had stolen from sick children, from at-risk youth, from everything they had claimed to represent. She calculated the total. It was staggering. $28.4 million, over 5 years. He had been stealing from her from their foundation since the very beginning. She leaned back, the numbers swimming on her screen. The betrayal was so absolute, so monstrous, it was almost abstract. He hadn't just built a new life. He had funded it with the suffering of others. And then she found the final diabolical twist. She was looking at the incorporation documents for Viridian Consulting, the most active shell responsible for over $15 million of the theft. The documents had been filed electronically. She found the original scans, the ones sent to the lawyers, and she saw the signature on the authorization line right next to his. Eleanor Vance Thorne. She stared at it. It was her signature, a perfect, flawless digital recreation. She frantically pulled the files for the other shells. Summit, Oceanside. Her name was on all of them, as co-founder, as COO, as signatory. He hadn't just stolen the money. He had made her his accomplice. She realized the horrifying genius of his plan. He had used her. Her reputation, her forensic background, her meticulous nature, he had used it all as a shield. Who would ever suspect the books were cooked when Eleanor Vance Thorne was the one guaranteeing them? And he had built himself a failsafe. If she ever found out, if she ever threatened to expose him, he wouldn't just be destroyed. She would be too. He had chained her to his crime. She would be the one going to prison with him. She who had dedicated her life to this. He hadn't just thought he had it all. He had thought he had her completely and totally. The door to the study opened. It was Marcus beaming, holding his tuxedo in a garment bag. "It's here. The final look. What do you think, Eldo? I look like a man who's about to change the world." Eleanor looked at him, really looked at him. At the charming sociopath who had not only betrayed her but had meticulously planned to bury her with him. The rage was gone. The shock was gone. All that was left was ice. "You look," she said, closing the laptop, "like a man who deserves everything that's coming to him." He laughed, taking it as a compliment. "That's my girl. Now get dressed. We've got a world to save." "You're right," she said, standing up. "I have one last phone call to make to the event coordinator. A slight change to the program." "A change? A surprise," Eleanor said, walking past him. "I'm adding a special announcement from both of us." The 24 hours leading up to the Beacon of Hope Gala were the calm before the atomic blast. Eleanor operated on a level of pure cold focus. She had a new objective. It was no longer about saving her marriage. That was a burnt-out crater. It was no longer even about simple revenge. It was about survival, and it was about justice. She knew Marcus. He was a narcissist, but a brilliant one. His plan to frame her as a co-conspirator was his masterstroke. If she went to the police, it would be her word and her forged signature against his. It would be a he said, she said battle between a husband and wife buried in legal muck for years. The foundation would be destroyed. The money would remain hidden in offshore accounts, and he might even walk. He had left her only one path, a path he would never see coming. He wanted a public stage. He wanted the adulation of millions. She would give it to him. She would use his own ego as the weapon. She couldn't just go to the police. She had to go to the public, the SEC and the district attorney's office simultaneously. She had to create an event so explosive, so undeniable that he couldn't possibly spin his way out of it. She had to detonate the bomb in his hands on live television. First, she prepared her arsenal. She spent all night creating a digital package. She didn't just copy the files, she annotated them. She created a flowchart tracing the money from the St. Jude grant through the Viridian Shell and into the trust fund for Leo Reyes Thorne. She highlighted the forged signatures and placed them side by side with her real signature from their marriage license and passport. The difference was subtle, but to a forensic expert, it was a canyon. She compiled the photos she had taken in Greenwich, the wire transfer receipts for the house, the mail addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Thorne. She put it all on 3 separate encrypted USB drives, labeling them the People's Exhibit, the SEC's Exhibit, and the DA's Exhibit. Second, she arranged the delivery. She used a secure, anonymous courier service. The first drive was sent to the home of Anita Jackson, the most feared financial journalist at the New York Times, with a note, "Hold for release. Watch the Beacon of Hope Gala tonight. You'll know when." The second drive was sent to the New York field office of the SEC, addressed to the head of enforcement. The third was sent to the office of the New York District Attorney, specifically to the White Collar Crime Division. All were set to be delivered at 8:00 p.m. exactly when Marcus was scheduled to begin his speech. Third, she secured her own defense. She transferred half of her own personal premarital savings to a new bank account. The other half she wired to a private legal firm, Rylance Inspector, retaining them on her behalf. Her instructions were clear. Be at the Cipriani Ballroom at 8:30 p.m. Await my call. Bring a security team. Finally, she made the call she had mentioned to Marcus. She called Sarah Jenkins, the gala's frantic and stressed-out event coordinator. "Sarah, it's Eleanor Thorne," she said, her voice warm and accommodating. "Eleanor. Oh, thank goodness. Is everything okay? We're 12 hours out." "Everything is wonderful. But Marcus and we've been so moved by this honor, we'd like to do something special. A surprise. During his acceptance speech, he's going to cede the last few minutes to me. I have a personal announcement to make, something that reinforces our commitment to transparency." "Oh, how lovely, a new pledge." "Something like that," Eleanor said. "I'll need you to do two things. First, make sure the teleprompter feed is cut the moment he hands it over to me. I'll be speaking from the heart. Second, I need you to ensure the live feed director, the one from Forbes Live, knows to stay on me, no matter what. No cutting to the crowd, just me." "That's specific. But for you, done. A special heartfelt announcement from Eleanor Thorne. The press will love it." "I'm counting on it," Eleanor said and hung up. She was now the architect. She had built the scaffolding, laid the charges, and set the timer. All that was left was to walk her husband to the gallows he had built for himself. She went into her all-white marble bathroom and began to get ready for the gala. She selected the sapphire Oscar de la Renta gown, a color that symbolized loyalty, and she thought with a grim smile, ice. She sat at her vanity, applying her makeup with a steady hand. She was building a mask, the mask of the perfect, adoring wife. When Marcus came in, nodding his bow tie, he looked at her with pure, unadulterated pride. "Eleanor," he breathed, "you are without a doubt the most beautiful woman in this city. You are my rock." She turned a perfect painted-on smile on her face. "And you, Marcus?" she said, adjusting his bow tie, her fingers cold on his skin. "Are the man of the hour. Let's not keep the world waiting." The Cipriani Ballroom was a sea of glittering hypocrisy. Black ties, sequins, and the smell of expensive perfume mingled with the quiet, desperate hum of influence peddling. Every major name in New York finance, politics, and culture was there. And at the center of it all, at the head table, sat Marcus and Eleanor Thorne, bathed in the warm, adoring glow of the stage lights. The Forbes Live broadcast was in full swing. The host, a man named Tom Harrison, was gushing. In a world of cynicism, Marcus and Eleanor Thorne are a beacon of genuine hope. Their work at the Thorne Foundation is nothing short of revolutionary. Eleanor smiled and nodded, her hand resting lightly on Marcus's arm. Inside her heart was a cold, steady drum. She had timed her exits. She knew where her retained security team from Rylance Inspector was waiting just outside the main doors. She could see the glowing red REC light on the main broadcast camera. 8:00 p.m. The packages had been delivered. The DA had his drive. The Times had theirs. The ceremony dragged on. A senator spoke. A CEO was honored. Finally, the moment arrived. "And now," the host intoned, "the moment we've all been waiting for. Please welcome the recipients of the 2025 Beacon of Hope Award, the couple who is truly building a better tomorrow, Marcus and Eleanor Thorne." The ballroom erupted in a standing ovation. Marcus, in his element, soaked it in. He waved, blew a kiss to the crowd, and then gallantly helped Eleanor to the stage. He looked every inch the conquering hero. They took their places at the podium. The heavy crystal award sat between them. Marcus leaned into the microphone. "Thank you. Thank you, friends. We are humbled. We are truly, truly humbled." He launched into his speech, the one she'd heard him practicing. It was a masterpiece of self-congratulation disguised as humility. "The work we do, it's not about us," he said, his voice thick with practiced emotion. "It's about the future. It's about transparency. It's about building a world where every child, regardless of their zip code, has a chance to succeed. Eleanor watched him, her expression one of polite adoration. She saw the teleprompter scrolling. She saw the cameraman. She saw the front row faces, the mayor, the bank presidents, all hanging on his every word. "But I can't stand here," Marcus continued, "and accept this honor alone. Because the beacon of hope in my life, the person who is the true engine of all we do, is my brilliant, beautiful, and utterly selfless wife, Eleanor." He turned to her, his eyes shining. "This isn't my award. It's our award. Eleanor, my rock, I love you." The crowd awed. This was it. He gestured for her to join him at the mic. "In fact, true," he ad-libbed, "she's insisted on adding a little surprise announcement. My wife, always keeping me on my toes." He smiled, stepping back, ceding the stage to her. The teleprompter went blank just as she'd requested. The red light on the camera was a burning eye. Eleanor stepped forward. The ballroom went silent. She took a deep breath. "Thank you, Marcus," she began, her voice crisp and clear, amplified to the room and to the millions watching at home. "You're right. I am selfless, and you couldn't have done any of this without me." Marcus's smile faltered just a fraction. This wasn't the tone he was expecting. "You mentioned transparency," Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength. "And in the spirit of that transparency, I have an announcement to make. Not a new pledge, but a clarification." She looked directly into the camera. "My husband, Marcus Thorne, is a thief." A collective audible gasp sucked the air from the room. Marcus froze, a rictus of a smile still on his face. He thought it was a joke. "Eleanor." He laughed nervously, reaching for her arm. She stepped away from him. "For the past 5 years," she announced, "Marcus Thorne has systematically embezzled $28.4 million from the Thorne Foundation for Tomorrow." The room exploded in chaos. People were standing up shouting. The Forbes Live director was screaming in the producer's ear, "Keep rolling, do not cut this feed." "He stole $2.5 million from the St. Jude Children's Hospital grant," she said, her voice rising above the din. "He stole $1 million from the Gates Foundation STEM program. He stole money meant for homeless women for scholarships for cancer research." Marcus's face had gone from confusion to a mask of pure white-hot terror. "Eleanor, what are you—" "She's having an episode. She's not well. Security." "And he did it?" Eleanor shouted. "To fund his other life." This time the room went dead silent. "He used that stolen money to purchase a $3 million home in Greenwich, Connecticut for his mistress, a woman named Isabella Reyes. He used it to fund a trust for their 2-year-old son, Leo. He even had the audacity to give them our name." She was pacing the stage now, a lioness in a sapphire gown. "And the worst part," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper, "is that he knew I would find out. I'm a forensic accountant. So he planned for it. He built a trap." She turned to Marcus, who looked like he was about to be physically ill. "He forged my signature on the incorporation documents for his shell companies, Viridian Consulting, Apex Solutions. He made me his co-conspirator, believing that if I ever discovered his secret, I'd be too terrified to expose him. He believed I would go to prison to protect his reputation." She turned back to the camera. "He was wrong." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a single silver USB drive, the real one. "This drive contains the full ledger, the wire transfers, the forged signatures next to the real ones, the photographs, everything." She held it up for the camera to see. "As we speak, identical copies are on the desks of the SEC, the district attorney, and Anita Jackson at the New York Times. The cars you hear pulling up outside Marcus, they're not for you. Well, actually, they are." As if on cue, 2 uniformed NYPD officers, followed by 2 detectives in suits, burst through the ballroom's main doors. Marcus looked at the door, then at Eleanor. The charm was gone. All that was left was the hollow, terrified core, Eleanor leaned into the microphone one last time, looking not at her husband, but at the cameras, at the millions of witnesses to her emancipation. He thought he had it all. He was right. He had it all coming. She dropped the USB drive on the podium. She turned, walked past her frozen, shattered husband, and descended the stage. Her personal lawyer and security team met her at the bottom, forming a protective bubble. She never looked back as the detectives ascended the stage and placed their hands on Marcus Thorne. The sound that followed Eleanor's final devastating sentence was not one of silence. It was the sound of 1,000 separate realities shattering at once. A woman in the front row screamed. A dozen people shouted, "Oh my God!" The frantic clicks of phone cameras trying to capture the scene created a sound like a swarm of digital locusts. Eleanor didn't wait for the chaos to crest. As she stepped down from the stage, her lawyer, a formidable man named Daniel Rylance from the firm, Rylance Inspector, materialized beside her. He and 2 private security guards, both built like NFL linebackers, formed a tight protective wedge. "It's done," Eleanor said, her voice a whisper, not of fear, but of finality. "It's done." Rylance confirmed, his hand on her elbow, guiding her. "This way. The car is at the service exit." They moved as a single determined unit. The ballroom behind them was pure bedlam. Guests, the city's elite bankers, politicians, were scrambling, some towards the exits, others towards the stage, their phones held high. On that stage, Marcus Thorne was a statue, his face a mask of waxy white disbelief. The red REC light of the Forbes live camera was still on a single unblinking eye, broadcasting his humiliation to the world. "Eleanor!" He finally roared, the sound ripped from his throat. It was a sound of pure animalistic rage. "Eleanor, you—" But she was already gone. He took a step to follow her, but the 2 NYPD detectives, followed by the 2 plainclothesmen, were already ascending the stage steps. "Mr. Thorne," the lead detective said, his voice low but carrying in the sudden lull. "Marcus Thorne. This is insane." Marcus sputtered, his eyes wild. "This is a joke. My wife, she's mentally ill. She's having a psychotic break. Get her, not me." "Sir, we have a warrant for your arrest based on materials delivered to the district attorney's office. You need to come with us, quietly." "Quietly?" Marcus laughed, a high hysterical sound. "You're arresting me on the word of a... The detective was done talking. He nodded to his partner. As the flash bulbs of 1,000 iPhones ignited, the world saw Marcus Thorne, the man who cured greed, being forced to put his hands behind his back. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs was the last sound the Forbes live microphone picked up before the feed was abruptly cut. By the time Eleanor was in the back of her lawyer's black Escalade, pulling away from the Cipriani, her phone was vibrating so intensely on the seat that it looked alive. The Forbes live clip, all 4 minutes of it, was already the single most watched video on the planet. It hadn't just gone viral, it had become a cultural detonation. The next morning, the world was redrawn. The New York Post cover was the one everyone remembered, the high-definition shot of Marcus being cuffed. His perfect tuxedo rumpled his face, a mask of ugly fury. The headline, in a font size, usually reserved for declarations of war, read Thorne apart. But it was the New York Times that delivered the kill shot. Anita Jackson's exposé, which dropped online at 2:00 a.m., was a masterpiece of journalistic annihilation. It wasn't a gossip piece. It was a federal indictment in prose. She had the package. She published the flowcharts. She published the side-by-side signature comparison with a forensic expert's annotation pointing out the micro-hesitations in the digital forgery. She had the Greenwich House sale records. She had the timeline. By 6:00 a.m., the narrative was set in stone. Eleanor was not a scorned wife. She was a brilliant, meticulous whistleblower. Marcus wasn't a philanderer. He was a sociopath and a high-level corporate criminal. Marcus, however, was not without his own arsenal. He had been allowed one call, and he hadn't called his mistress or his mother. He had called Benjamin Cade. Cade was the most expensive, most ruthless defense attorney in New York. He was a fixer who represented Russian oligarchs and disgraced pharmaceutical CEOs. His fee was 8 figures, and he was worth every penny. Marcus's astronomical bail set at $50 million was posted by Cade within hours. At 3:00 p.m., a freshly showered and defiant Marcus Thorne, wearing a new Brioni suit, walked out of the courthouse with Cade at his side. They held an immediate press conference on the courthouse steps. "My client Marcus Thorne is the victim," Cade snarled into the microphones, his voice like gravel. "He is the victim of a deeply disturbed woman and a calculated vindictive plot. This is not a criminal case. It is a marital dispute that has been twisted by a woman suffering from delusions." He then launched the smear campaign. "We will prove in court that Ms. Eleanor Vance, who is by the way still legally Mrs. Thorne, was not only a participant in these financial irregularities, but the chief architect. We will prove that she siphoned this money herself, and upon being discovered by her husband, framed him in this spectacular, hysterical fashion to save herself. She is the guilty party, and we look forward to her arrest." It was a brilliant, if utterly false, counter-narrative. It was the exact trap Marcus had set from the beginning. The district attorney's office, now under immense public pressure, felt the squeeze. They had 2 competing and equally plausible narratives. They called Eleanor in. The meeting in a drab, windowless conference room was not the hero's welcome she might have expected. It was an interrogation. "Ms. Vance," said the lead prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Hannah Lou, "we have a problem. Your name is on everything. Cade's defense is plausible. Why did you wait? Why the live TV stunt? It looks like a panic move. It looks like you got caught and you're trying to cut a deal by throwing your husband under the bus." Daniel Rylance. Her lawyer stepped in. "My client will not be answering questions until we have a formal agreement." "We can't offer an agreement until we know who the real criminal is," Lou snapped. "For all I know, you two were in it together until the mistress." Eleanor, who had been silent, looked up. The ice was back in her eyes. "He got sloppy," she said, her voice low. "He got arrogant. Go to the server logs. The original forgery scans for Viridian Consulting were uploaded on October 14th from an IP address at the St. Regis Hotel in Shanghai. I was in New York in a board meeting presenting the Q3 results. An alibi you can confirm with 40 people and the building's entry logs. He uploaded the second forgery for Apex Solutions from his personal laptop at the Greenwich House. My name is on the server logs for the New York office. My access credentials were used from his laptop. He wasn't just framing me, he was sloppy about it." She leaned forward. "You are looking for a fall guy. I am not it. I am your star witness. I am the only person who can walk a jury through his entire house of cards, but I will not do it from a defendant's chair." Rylance finished the thought. "You grant her full transactional immunity. Now, in writing, or Mr. Cade is going to paint you all as incompetent fools for letting the real mastermind walk, and Mr. Thorne will move his $28 million so far offshore you'll never find it. She's giving you the case. Don't waste her time." Hannah Lou stared at Eleanor for a long, tense minute. She saw the truth. She saw the conviction. She nodded. "Get me the immunity paperwork." The collateral damage was devastating. The press denied access to Eleanor swarmed 547 Willow Lane. Isabella Reyes was filmed in tears trying to load her son Leo into a Range Rover, which was later seized as reporters shouted, "Did you know the money was stolen from sick children?" Her lawyer released a statement claiming she was the greatest victim of all, a single mother who had been duped by a man she knew as Marcus Reyes, a widower in private equity. She had no idea about his New York life, his wife, or his foundation. She and her son disappeared, their lives and reputations ruined the house seized by federal marshals as an asset purchased with criminal funds. The trial of Marcus Thorne began 6 months later. It was the trial of the decade. The courtroom was a circus. Benjamin Cade was brilliant a lion in the courtroom, but he was fighting a war against arithmetic. The digital trail was absolute. David Chen, the CFO, testified. The bankers testified. The forensic IT experts testified. Then Eleanor took the stand. For 3 days she was a masterclass in precision. Dressed in simple conservative suits, she was no longer the glamorous wife. She was Professor Vance, the forensic accountant. She walked the jury through the ledgers, the shell companies, the wire transfers with the cold, passionless clarity of a surgeon. Then came Cade's cross-examination. "Mrs. Thorne." "It's Ms. Vance," she corrected him, her voice firm. "Ms. Vance, is it not true that you discovered your husband was having an affair?" "That is true." "And you were in fact furious, humiliated, devastated." "I was," she agreed. "So furious, in fact, that you decided to destroy him, that you took this affair, and you built this fantasy of a massive financial conspiracy, all to get revenge. You used your expertise to frame him, didn't you?" Eleanor looked at him. Then she turned very deliberately to the jury. "Mr. Cade, I am an accountant. I track numbers, not affairs. My fury did not invent the wire transfer of $2.5 million from the St. Jude grant. My humiliation did not create the Viridian Consulting LLC registered in the Cayman Islands. My fantasy did not forge my own signature on an electronic filing. A forgery, by the way, that your own expert witnesses have been unable to refute." She leaned into the microphone. "Mr. Thorne did not have a simple affair. He committed 42 counts of complex federal fraud. He didn't just break our marriage vows, he broke the law. And he used the suffering of sick children and the hopes of at-risk youth to fund his new house. That is not a marital dispute. That is a crime. And I did not frame him. He framed himself." Cade had no more questions. The jury was out for less than an hour. Guilty. All 42 counts. At the sentencing, Marcus, gaunt and broken, finally tried to apologize, to plead for leniency. The judge, a woman famous for her harsh sentences on white-collar crime, was unmoved. "Mr. Thorne, your crimes are not just financial," she said, her voice ringing with contempt. "You didn't just steal money, you stole public trust. You stole the very idea of charity. You were a beacon of hope, and you used that light to cast a shadow of greed. You are the worst kind of thief." The sentence: 30 years in a federal penitentiary with no possibility of parole for 20. The Thorne Foundation for Tomorrow was dissolved. Eleanor, as the last remaining officer, oversaw the liquidation. The penthouse, the art, the cars all sold. She worked with the federal marshals to claw back every penny from the offshore accounts, the Miami condo, and the sale of the Greenwich house. When the dust settled, the full $28.4 million had been recovered. Eleanor's final public act was not on a stage, but in her lawyer's office. She held a quiet press conference. She announced the creation of the Vance Fund. "This fund," she stated, "is endowed with the $28.4 million that was stolen. Its sole mission is to provide legal and financial aid to whistleblowers and to provide block grants to the organizations that were originally defrauded, including St. Jude." She introduced the new board, led by a visibly relieved David Chen. Then she handed him the check. A reporter called out, "Ms. Vance, what's next for you? Will you run the fund?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, I'm just an accountant. My work here is done. The books are balanced." She walked out of the conference room, not into a private car, but onto the street, where she hailed a yellow taxi and disappeared into the New York traffic. She was never a public figure again. The woman in the sapphire dress, the icon of justice, was retired. The real Eleanor Vance moved to Northern California, took a position as an adjunct professor of forensic accounting at a small university, and was, for the first time in her life, completely anonymous. She had lost her marriage, her fortune, and her company, but she had reclaimed her name, her integrity, and her life. She had thought she had it all, and she had discovered it was all a lie. And in the end, she was the only one left standing. What a story of betrayal, lies, and ultimate public justice. Eleanor Vance Thorne was pushed into a corner and she came out fighting with the only weapons she had, the truth and a live microphone. It's a chilling reminder that the most polished facades can hide the darkest secrets. What do you think? Was Eleanor's public takedown a brilliant act of justice or a cold-hearted revenge? Could she have handled it differently, or did Marcus's golden handcuff trap leave her with no other choice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were on the edge of your seat watching this story of karma and consequences unfold, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who loves a story of epic justice. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that bell. We have new stories of drama, betrayal, and twists dropping every week, and you won't want to miss a single one.